My son tossed a few dollars on the table. Here's for the bus, old woman. But what he didn't know was that I already had a private seat reserved on a jet. The clatter of those coins hitting the wood still haunts me at night. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you for a second feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. It was 7 in the evening in Queens, New York. The air smelled of rain and the exhaust from the city bus that had just rumbled past the house belonging to Andrew, my son. In my hands, I held the cough syrup I had bought for my grandson, Sebastian, who was just 5 and had been sick all week. The small bottle had cost me $20 of my Social Security check, money I no longer had for my own prescriptions. But what did it matter? He was my grandson. I rang the bell of the house I myself had helped them buy. A 2-story house in a middle-class neighborhood, with a small yard and aluminum frame windows that shone under the yellowish light of the street lamp. Patricia, my daughter-in-law, opened the door with an expression I knew all too well. Lips pressed into a thin line, eyebrows furrowed, as if my presence were an annoying interruption to her perfect day. "What do you want now, ma'am?" she said, not even opening the door all the way. Her voice had that cold edge she had perfected over the 8 years she'd been married to my son. She was wearing a blue dress that I had given her last year for her birthday, back when I still believed we could get along. "I just came to bring Sebastian his syrup," I answered, holding up the pharmacy bag. "Andy told me he still had a fever." Patricia sighed, as if I had just asked her to move a mountain. "Andy's watching the game. Don't bother him." But I had already seen my son from the doorway. He was sprawled on the living room sofa, the same brown leather sofa I had paid for in monthly installments when they didn't even have money for basic furniture. His feet were up on the coffee table, a Bud Light in his hand, his eyes glued to the flat-screen TV that had also come from my savings. "Andy," I called out gently, "I brought the syrup for Sebastian." My son turned to me with that look of annoyance that broke my soul every time I saw it. The same brown eyes he had inherited from his father, but which now looked at me as if I were a stranger begging on the street. "Are you here asking for favors again, Mom? It's getting old. We're not your personal ATM," he said, without even pausing the TV, without getting up from the sofa I had paid for. "I just came to bring the syrup, son. You told me he had a fever. So what? Now you're showing up out of pity or something? Look, take this and go before Trish gets annoyed." Without even looking at me, Andrew reached into the pocket of his jeans and pulled out a handful of change and a few crumpled bills. He threw them onto the coffee table with a dry, metallic sound that echoed through the room. Some quarters rolled off and fell onto the cold tile floor. One of them rolled to a stop right in front of my black shoes, the only decent pair I had left. "That's enough for the bus and subway. And don't show up again without calling first," he added, turning up the TV volume. Patricia smirked from the door. A small, almost imperceptible smile, but I saw it. It was the smile of someone who had won a battle I didn't even know we were fighting. "Old woman?" Patricia muttered under her breath, but just loud enough for me to hear. As if I were no longer her mother-in-law, the woman who had cared for her son when she worked double shifts, who had lent them money without interest, who had spent sleepless nights by Sebastian's side when he had pneumonia. As if I were just an annoying burden to be tolerated from time to time. Just then, Sebastian appeared on the stairs, wearing his dinosaur pajamas, his cheeks flushed with fever. "Grandma?" he said in his hoarse little voice. "Did you bring me something?" "Yes, my love," I replied, crouching down to his level. "I brought you syrup to make you feel better." But before I could give him the bottle, Andrew got up from the sofa and snatched the bag from my hand. "I'll give it to him later. Just go. It's getting late." I looked at the money scattered on the floor. $5.80 in total. The exact price of a round trip on the bus and subway to get back to my apartment in Jackson Heights. Andrew knew perfectly well how much public transport cost. He had calculated the exact amount for me to leave and not come back for several days. I stood there, my empty hands still bearing the marks of years working in a food processing plant. The same hands that had ironed his school uniforms in the early morning, that had sold cupcakes at bake sales to pay for his books, that had counted every single penny so he could get the accounting degree that now gave him a job in a firm in Midtown. I picked them up, one coin at a time, while Patricia and Andrew looked down on me, as if I were a cleaning lady picking up dirty dishes after a family dinner to which I had never been invited. The subway ride home felt endless. Every jolt, every sudden break, every passenger getting on and off was another reminder of the distance that had grown between my son and me. Through the fogged-up window, I watched the houses of Queens pass by. The same streets where I had walked so many times bringing him food when he lived alone, where I had run every time he needed me. But what hurt most wasn't the money thrown on the floor. It was the words, "old woman." It was the contempt in his eyes. It was the silence of my grandson who had learned not to hug me when his parents were around. That night, sitting in my small one-bedroom apartment with a cup of chamomile tea in my hands, I looked at the photographs on my living room table. Andrew as a baby, smiling in my arms. Andrew at his graduation, hugging me with pride. Andrew on his wedding day, whispering in my ear, "Thanks for everything, Mom. You'll always be the most important person in my life." When did I become invisible to him? When did I stop being his mother and become a nuisance? When did my sacrifices become obligations he could pay off with coins tossed on the floor? I couldn't sleep that night, but it wasn't sadness that kept me awake. It was something deeper. It was the quiet understanding that maybe, just maybe, the time had come to stop being the woman who always gave and never asked. The woman who always forgave and never complained. The woman who was always available, even though no one was ever available for her. Without knowing it, my son had planted the seed of my liberation that night, and I was about to water it with all the dignity I had left. The days following the humiliation of the coins were spent reliving every sacrifice I had made for Andrew, as if my mind were an old film playing over and over, showing me scenes I had stored in the deepest corner of my heart. I remembered that December morning back in 2003. Andrew was 17 and had gotten a part-time job at a Best Buy in the city, his first real job. I was working the night shift at the food processing plant in an industrial part of Brooklyn, from 11 at night until 6 in the morning. I'd come home with my hands swollen from the cold of the refrigerated rooms, my blue uniform soaked with sweat, and my body aching as if I'd been beaten. But there he was, standing in the kitchen of our small apartment, his crisp white shirt, perfectly ironed, waiting for him on the table. I had learned to iron in silence so as not to wake the neighbors. The ironing board squeaked like a wounded cat, but I had wrapped its legs in old rags to muffle the sound. "Thanks, boss," Andrew would say, using that affectionate term that made me feel like the most important woman in the world. He'd put on the shirt in front of the hallway mirror, fix his hair with cheap gel, and give me a kiss on the forehead before running out to catch the 6:30 bus. I would stand there, in the kitchen, watching him walk away from the window overlooking the street. A handsome young man, with bright eyes full of the belief that the whole world was waiting for him. And I would think, it's all worth it if he's happy. When did that "thanks, boss" turn into, "It's getting old, Mom"? I also remembered the day he turned 23. He had finished his accounting degree at a private university that cost me every penny of my severance pay when the plant closed down. I had found a part-time job cleaning offices in a corporate building in Midtown, Monday through Saturday, from 5 to 10 in the morning. I earned about $1,800 a month, 1,000 of which went to Andrew's tuition. That day, on his birthday, he came home with Patricia, a pretty blonde girl with straight, shiny hair who was studying graphic design at a university even more expensive than Andrew's. She was wearing a blouse that cost more than my weekly salary, and she greeted me with that polite smile you learn when you want to make a good impression on your boyfriend's mom. "Mom," Andrew said, "Trish and I need to ask you something." They sat on the living room sofa, the same brown fabric couch I'd bought secondhand at a thrift store. Andrew took Patricia's hands in his, as if he were about to propose, but instead, he looked at me. "We want to move in together. We found an apartment in Astoria, near my job, but we need you to co-sign the lease." Co-sign. A word that sounded so simple, so innocent. But I knew what it meant. It meant that if they didn't pay, I would be responsible with my home, my salary, with everything I had built over years of work and sacrifice. "How much is the rent?" I asked them. $2,500 a month, Patricia answered, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. $2,500, more than my entire monthly salary. But Andrew had that sparkle in his eyes, that expression of hope that reminded me of the boy he used to be. The boy who would hug me when I came home tired from work, who told me that when he grew up, he would buy me a house with a garden so I could have flowers. Okay, I told them. Let's see the papers. I signed as the guarantor without reading the fine print. After all, what could go wrong? He was my son, my only son, the man in whom I had placed all my dreams and hopes. For the first 6 months, Andrew would call me religiously every Sunday. How are you, boss? Need anything? Trish says you should come over for dinner this week. I would arrive on Wednesdays after work, carrying grocery bags with fresh vegetables to make his favorite meal, chicken and dumplings, the same dish I used to make him when he was little and came home from school hungry. Patricia would welcome me politely during those first dinners. She'd ask about my job, feigning interest in my stories about the people in the offices I cleaned. She even asked me for the recipe for the lasagna I made for special holidays. But something started to change after the first year. The Sunday calls became bi-weekly, then monthly. The Wednesday dinners turned into, "Mom, this week is complicated. Maybe next week." And when I did finally visit, Patricia no longer asked about my job. She would watch me from the corner of her eye as I cooked, as if my presence in her kitchen was an invasion of her territory. "Ma'am," she said to me one evening as I was washing the dishes after dinner, "I think Andy is old enough now that you don't need to cook for him anymore. I can take care of that." The message was clear. Your son doesn't need you anymore. But what broke my heart wasn't what Patricia said. It was that Andrew, my Andrew, said nothing. He just sat there in the living room watching TV, as if he hadn't heard a thing. When Sebastian arrived, I thought everything would change. Grandchildren have a magical way of bringing families together, right? The day he was born, I was at the hospital at 5 in the morning. I had taken the day off work, bought flowers and a small gift, a little blue stuffed rabbit I found at a local shop. Andrew came out of the delivery room with tears in his eyes, holding this tiny baby who looked so much like he did as a newborn. "He's your grandson, Mom," he told me. And for a moment, a precious, fleeting moment, I was Mom again instead of Ma'am. Sebastian became my world. Every weekend I would go over to babysit so Andrew and Patricia could go out. I changed diapers with the same hands that had changed his father's 30 years earlier. I fed him with the same infinite patience. I sang him the same lullabies I had made up for Andrew when we didn't have money even for a radio. "Thanks, boss," Andrew would say when he and Patricia got home from their outings. "I don't know what we'd do without you." I felt useful again, needed, loved. But the months went by, and I began to notice that they only called me when they needed a babysitter, when Sebastian got sick, when they had an important dinner, when they wanted to go away for the weekend to the Hamptons with friends. Never to ask how I was, never to invite me on their family outings, never to include me in their celebrations. Last year, on my 64th birthday, I waited for a call that never came. I spent the day alone in my apartment, eating a slice of cake I had bought from the corner bakery, a small, individual chocolate cupcake that cost $3 and tasted like loneliness. At 9 at night, when I had lost all hope, my phone rang. "Mom, sorry, I completely forgot about your birthday. We were so busy with Trish's work, but we'll buy you something tomorrow, okay?" The next day, a bouquet of wilted flowers arrived, bought from a guy selling them at a traffic light on the highway. Flowers that cost $10 and were probably chosen by Patricia without even looking at them. But what hurt the most was realizing that I wasn't surprised anymore. I didn't expect anything more. I had already accepted that my place in my son's life was that of a part-time employee, available when needed, invisible when not. That night, after throwing the wilted flowers in the trash, I sat in front of my dresser mirror. My reflection showed me a 64-year-old woman, with gray hair I no longer bothered to dye, with wrinkles that told the story of every worry I had carried for him. And I asked myself, at what point did I stop being a person and become a function? When did I stop having value for who I was and only for what I could provide? The answer hit me like a punch to the gut. Always. From the moment I decided that a mother's love meant disappearing so that my son could shine. From the moment I confused sacrifice with love. From the moment I believed that giving all of myself was the only way to deserve his affection. But that night, in front of the mirror, I began to see something different in my eyes, a glint that had been dormant for years, a spark of rebellion that whispered to me, "You deserve more than being invisible." That spark of rebellion I had seen in the mirror stayed with me all the following week. It was as if I had woken up from a very long dream, as if for the first time in years I was seeing my life with clarity, and I didn't like what I saw at all. On Thursday morning, while cleaning the offices in the corporate building in Midtown, I got a text from Andrew. "Mom, can you watch Sebastian on Saturday? Trish and I are going to a wedding in the Hamptons. We'll leave food for you." I read the message 3 times. It wasn't a question. It was a command disguised as a request. There was no, "Please," no, "Could you help us out?" It was simply an expectation. As if my time was worthless. As if my entire existence revolved around their needs. I wrote and deleted my reply about 10 times. First, I wrote, "Of course, son, as always." But something in my chest tightened when I read those words. Then I wrote, "Can't you take Sebastian with you?" But I deleted it because it sounded too rude. Finally, I wrote, "What time do you need me?" The response came immediately. 7 a.m. We'll be back around 11 p.m. Thanks. Not even a, "We really appreciate it," or "We know it's a lot to ask." Just thanks, like you'd say to the cashier at 7-Eleven. On Saturday, I arrived promptly at 7 in the morning. Patricia was already dressed up, wearing a pink dress I'd seen on the Instagram of an expensive boutique in Soho. Andrew was putting on a tie I had given him last year for Father's Day. "Good morning," I said as I walked in. "Oh, hi," Patricia replied without looking at me, busy applying mascara in front of the entryway mirror. "Sebastian had cereal. His lunch is in the fridge, just heated up. He goes to bed at 8. Don't give him any candy." Dry instructions. Like the ones you give a new housekeeper. Andrew came down the stairs with a small suitcase. "We're leaving, Mom." "Be good," he yelled to Sebastian, who was watching cartoons in the living room. "What time did you say you'd be back?" I asked. "Around 11 or 12. Depends on traffic," Andrew replied, checking his phone. "Oh, and if anything happens, don't call us unless it's a real emergency. We're going to be busy." They left without a kiss, without a hug, without even looking back at me when they said goodbye, as if I were part of the furniture. Sebastian and I had a wonderful day together. We played with his toy cars. I read him stories. We watched Pixar movies snuggled on the couch. He hugged me with that pure, spontaneous affection of children, telling me, "I love you so much, Grandma," without asking for anything in return. He was the only one in that house who made me feel truly loved. At 8 o'clock sharp, I put him to bed. I sang him the lullaby I had made up for his father 30 years ago. "Sleep now, my dear one. Sleep now, my love. May the angels above watch you with love." Sebastian closed his eyes with a smile, clutching his stuffed rabbit to his chest. I stayed in the living room, waiting for them. 11 o'clock passed. So did 12. By 1 in the morning, I was starting to worry. I sent them a text. "Are you okay? What time are you getting back?" The reply came 40 minutes later. "Everything's fine. We're staying at a hotel. We'll be back early tomorrow." A hotel? They had decided to stay in the Hamptons without telling me? What about me? Was I supposed to stay there all night like an on-call employee? I called them. Andrew answered on the 5th ring, with music and laughter in the background. "What's up, Mom?" "Son, you didn't tell me you were staying over." "What should I do? Should I go home?" "Oh, Mom, don't be so dramatic. Just stay there with Sebastian. It's only one night. We'll be back early tomorrow so you can leave." "But I didn't bring any clothes to stay over. Wear something of Trish's or sleep in what you have on. It's not a big deal." He hung up. I stood there in that silent living room, phone in hand, feeling as if I had been slapped. It's not a big deal. My plans, my time, my comfort, they weren't a big deal. I slept on the living room sofa, covered with a blanket I found in the hall closet. At 6 in the morning, Sebastian woke up and ran downstairs to find me. "Grandma, why did you sleep here? Where are my parents?" "They stayed in the Hamptons, my love, but they'll be here in a little while." I made him breakfast, gave him a bath, and played with him all morning. At 2 in the afternoon, Andrew and Patricia arrived, looking hungover and with dark circles under their eyes. How'd it go? Andrew asked, as if nothing had happened. Fine, I replied, though my blood was boiling inside. Oh, cool. That's good. You can go now, right? Thanks. Not a single apology. Not an explanation. Not even an acknowledgement that they had left me stranded there without any consideration. But what finally woke me up happened 3 days later. On Tuesday morning, while waiting for the bus to go to work, I saw Patricia posting photos on Facebook from her weekend in the Hamptons. It wasn't just a wedding. They had gone to a spa, had dinner at expensive restaurants, and stayed in a luxury hotel with a jacuzzi in the room. A whole romantic weekend they had planned for weeks, and I had been their free babysitter, their 24/7 on-call employee. In one of the photos, Patricia had written, "We needed this time together. Sometimes you have to treat yourself. We deserve it all. Luxury life, eternal love. We deserve it all." Those words stabbed me like daggers. They deserved everything. Luxury hotels, expensive dinners, time for themselves, the freedom to leave without notice. But I, the woman who had made their lifestyle possible, I didn't even deserve an honest explanation. That same day, after work, I decided to stop by their house to talk to Andrew. I had to tell him how I felt. I had to set boundaries for this situation that had become unbearable. I rang the bell. Patricia opened it, looking annoyed. "Now what do you want?" "I want to talk to Andrew." "He's busy. Tell me." "It's personal. It's with my son." Patricia sighed dramatically. "Andrew, your mom wants to talk to you." Andrew came, wiping his hands on a towel. He had been eating dinner. "What's up, Mom?" "Son, we need to talk. About what happened this weekend." "What about it?" "You stayed with Sebastian, like always. But you didn't tell me you were staying in a hotel." "You left me there without clothes, without notice." "Oh, Mom, you're a grown woman. Nothing was going to happen to you. That's not the point. The point is you don't respect me. You don't consider my time, my plans." Patricia laughed. A dry, mocking laugh. What plans? What plans could she possibly have? Andrew didn't scold her. He didn't tell her to be quiet. He just stood there, as if his wife's question were valid. As if a woman my age couldn't possibly have plans, dreams, a life of her own. "You're right," I told them. "I don't have any important plans. But I should. Mom, don't be so dramatic. We just need you to help us out from time to time." "From time to time?" The words came out louder than I intended. "I watch him every weekend. I lend you money every month. I co-signed for your house. I help you with everything you need. And I don't even deserve to be treated with basic respect?" Patricia and Andrew looked at each other. That exchange of glances couples make when they think someone is overreacting. "Ma'am," Patricia said to me in that condescending voice she had perfected, "nobody's forcing you. If you don't want to help, then don't. It's not that I don't want to help. It's that I want to be treated like a person, not an employee." "Here she goes with her drama again?" Patricia muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. Andrew said nothing. He just stood there, silent, while his wife insulted me to my face. That night, I came home with a painful but necessary clarity. I poured myself a chamomile tea and sat at my kitchen table with an old notebook. I made a list of everything I had done for them in the last 5 years. Co-signed their mortgage, liability of over $400,000, lent them $5,000 for the wedding, never paid back, paid the down payment on their car, $3,000, babysat. Sebastian, 8 days a month, brought them home-cooked meals twice a week, paid for Sebastian's medical emergencies, bought them clothes, toys, household items every month. At the bottom of the list, I wrote, "What do I get in return?" The answer fit on one line. Contempt, disrespect, and the constant feeling of being invisible. That night, for the first time in years, I couldn't sleep because of rage instead of sadness. It was a new, powerful feeling that scared me, but also filled me with energy. For the first time, I was asking myself, what if I say no? What if I stop being available all the time? What if I start valuing my own time the way they value theirs? The answer to those questions was about to arrive in the most unexpected way. The answer to my questions came the following Friday in the most unexpected way. I was at the Target in Queens, doing my weekly shopping with the $100 I had left after paying the electric and gas bills. I was loading my basket with the basics: beans, rice, bread, some cheap vegetables from the sale section. It was there, between the aisles of cereal and cleaning products, that I ran into Hope, Andrew, and Patricia's next-door neighbor, an older woman like me in her 70s, who always greeted me warmly when I went to visit my son. "Carol, dear," she called out from the other end of the aisle, pushing her cart towards me with a huge smile. "How are you? I haven't seen you around the neighborhood in a while." "Hello, Hope. Yes, I've been visiting Andy's less often lately." "Oh, I'm so glad I ran into you," she said, getting closer and lowering her voice like someone about to share a secret. "I wanted to ask you something. Do you know if your kids are thinking of moving?" The question struck me as odd. "Moving? No, not that I know of. Why do you ask?" Hope glanced from side to side, as if making sure no one else could hear us. "Well, on Wednesday, I saw some very fancy-looking men in suits arrive with briefcases and everything. They were in the house for about 2 hours. Afterwards, I saw your daughter-in-law taking pictures of all the rooms with her phone." A knot formed in my stomach. "Pictures of the rooms?" "Yes, and the yard, the garage too. You know, like when someone wants to sell or rent a property? That's why I thought they were moving." I stood there paralyzed in the middle of the aisle, my hands gripping the shopping cart. Fancy men with briefcases. Photos of the entire house. That could only mean one thing. They were having the property appraised. The house that I had co-signed the mortgage for. The house for which I was legally responsible. The house that, if they couldn't pay, could cost me my own apartment. "Are you all right, Carol?" Hope asked, touching my arm with concern. "You look very pale." Yes. I just got a little dizzy. It must be the heat." But it wasn't the heat. It was the ice-cold terror of realizing that something very serious was happening, and I was the last to know. I finished my shopping on autopilot. I paid, left the store, got on the bus home, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. The whole way, I couldn't stop thinking, were they getting me into some legal trouble without telling me? Were they planning to leave me with their mortgage debt? I got to my apartment and couldn't even put the groceries away. I pulled out all the papers I had stored in a shoebox under my bed. Mortgage documents, copies of contracts, payment receipts. I found the number for the bank that had handled the original loan. I dialed with trembling hands. "Good morning. This is Carol Evans. I'm the co-signer on a mortgage for a property in Queens. I wanted to know the status of the payments. One moment, please. Can you give me the property address?" I gave her the details. I heard the sound of a keyboard on the other end of the line. "Mrs. Evans, I see here that the mortgage on that property was paid off 3 months ago. The title was transferred to a new owner." The phone slipped from my hands. I had to pick it up off the floor. "What do you mean, paid off? Where are they living?" "I don't have that information, ma'am. I only know that the house was sold in April and the loan was closed. Your responsibility as a co-signer has ended." I hung up without even saying goodbye. My head was a hurricane of conflicting thoughts. If they no longer lived in that house, where were they living? Since when? Why hadn't they told me anything? I picked up the phone and called Andrew. It went straight to voicemail. I called Patricia. Same thing. I sent them a text. "Urgent. I need to talk to you. Call me." 2 hours passed. Nothing. I decided to go directly to their house, or wherever they were living now. The subway ride to their old neighborhood felt endless. Every red light, every stop, every minute filled me with more anxiety. When I finally arrived at the address I knew, I stood on the sidewalk for 5 minutes, trying to process what my eyes were seeing. The house looked exactly the same from the outside. The same beige siding, the same windows, the same small yard, but something was different. A discreet sign in the corner of the window. Sold. Sold. The house I thought was their home was sold. I rang the bell. A woman I didn't know opened the door. Older than me, elegantly dressed, with perfectly coiffed hair. "Yes, can I help you?" "Excuse me, I'm looking for the Morrison family. Andrew and Patricia Morrison." "Oh no, no one by that name lives here. I'm the new owner. I bought this house 2 months ago." I just stood there like a statue. 2 months? "Yes. Are you all right? You look very pale. Do you know?" Do you know where the people who lived here before went? No, ma'am. I only dealt with the real estate agent. They told me the previous owners had already moved out of state, to Florida or somewhere. I thanked her and walked away like a zombie. I didn't understand anything. If Andrew and Patricia hadn't lived here for months, where had they been living? Why did they keep telling me to come to this address to watch Sebastian? Where had I been taking care of my grandson all these weeks? I took out my phone and looked up Patricia's Facebook profile. I started scrolling through all her recent photos, looking for clues. In the pictures from the weekend in the Hamptons, in Sebastian's birthday photos, in the ones from her nights out with friends. And then I saw it. In the background of a photo she had posted a week ago, where she was toasting with a glass of wine, part of a living room was visible. A living room I didn't recognize. Different furniture, different decor, different windows. I zoomed in on the photo. On a small table in the corner was an envelope. I could just make out part of the address. Long Island City. Long Island City. One of the most expensive and trendy neighborhoods in all of New York. With trembling hands, I cross-referenced all the photos Patricia had posted in recent months, trying to identify locations. A photo at a Starbucks in LIC. Another at a luxury shopping center in the same area. One more at a restaurant I looked up online. It was in a corporate tower in Long Island City. They hadn't just moved without telling me. They had moved to one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the city, a place where the rent for an apartment costs more than my annual income. But what finally destroyed me was another photo, one she had posted just 3 days ago. Sebastian playing in a huge living room, with enormous floor-to-ceiling windows showing the city skyline. In the caption, she had written, "My prince happy in his new home. Infinitely, blessed Dakir luxury life. We deserve it all." Their new home. They had been living in a luxury condo in Long Island City for months, while I continued to be their free babysitter, their personal bank, their 24/7 on-call employee. And for all these months, every time I went to visit them, they had been meeting me at the old house where they no longer lived, putting on a whole show so I wouldn't know the truth. Why? Why all the deception? The answer hit me like a slap. Because if I knew where they really lived, if I knew the standard of living they had, if I knew they no longer needed me financially, maybe I would stop giving them money. Maybe I would stop being useful. And a mother who isn't useful is a mother who can be thrown away. I sat on a park bench across from the empty house and cried like I hadn't cried in years. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure rage. They had lied to me for months. They had used me as a free employee. They had made me believe they needed me when in reality, they only needed my money and my time. And worst of all, they had made my grandson an accomplice in their lie. That night, in the solitude of my apartment, I wrote a single sentence in my notebook. I will no longer be the fool who believes love is bought with sacrifices. It was time for them to meet a completely new Carol. A Carol who had learned that she deserved much more than scraps of respect. A Carol who was about to give them the surprise of their lives. The new Carol woke up the following Saturday with a strange feeling in her chest. It wasn't the familiar oppression of so many years, but something like the tingling you feel before you do something you've never done, but know you have to. Like every Saturday for the past 5 years, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. It was Andrew. "Morning, Mom. Can you come watch Sebastian today? Trish and I have some things to do." For the first time in my life, I didn't immediately reply, "Yes, of course, son." I just stood there, phone in hand, feeling as if I were standing at the edge of a cliff I had been waiting years to dare to jump from. "Mom? You there?" "Yes, I'm here." "So, are you coming?" The word no formed in my throat like an air bubble that had been trapped for decades. I felt as if I would choke if I didn't let it out. "No." Silence on the other end of the line. "What do you mean, no?" "I can't today, Andrew. I have plans." "What plans?" His voice sounded genuinely confused, as if the idea of me having my own plans was completely absurd. "My plans," I replied, and for the first time in years, my voice sounded firm, steady. "Mom, I don't get it. You always come on Saturdays. Trish is already ready. We had everything prepared." "Well, you'll have to change your plans, or take Sebastian with you, or find another babysitter. Another babysitter? Now his voice was annoyed. Mom, don't be ridiculous. You're his grandmother. Exactly. I'm his grandmother, not his nanny. And grandmothers are not available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without prior notice. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was as if I had run a marathon, as if I had released an energy that had been contained for years. 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was Patricia. Carol, what's wrong with you? Andrew says you don't want to come watch Sebastian. Good morning, Patricia. It's not that I don't want to. It's that I can't. Why can't you? Are you sick? No, I'm not sick. I have other commitments. What commitments? Her tone was one of total disbelief, as if it were impossible for a woman my age to have real commitments. That's personal. Ma'am, we really need you to come. We had everything planned. And I have my plans too. You should have asked me with more notice. But you always come. Exactly. I always come. I'm always available. I always say yes. But not today. Patricia hung up without saying goodbye. 2 minutes later, the phone rang again. Andrew again. Mom, Trish is really upset. She said you were very rude to her. I wasn't rude. I was honest. Look, I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but what's gotten into me? It came out louder than I expected. You really don't know what's gotten into me? No, I don't. You've been acting weird for a few weeks. I'm tired, Andrew. Tired of being your free employee. Tired of you only calling when you need something. Tired of being invisible until you require my services. Mom, you're not our employee. You're my mom. Oh, really? And when was the last time you called just to ask how I am? When was the last time you invited me to lunch just to spend time with me? When was the last time Sebastian came to visit me at my house? For a reason other than you needing me to watch him. Silence. You can't answer, can you? Because it hasn't happened. Because to you, I don't exist as a person. I only exist as a function. Mom, you're exaggerating. Am I exaggerating? I got up from the bed and went to the notebook where I had written down everything I'd done for them. In the last 5 years, I've lent you over $7,000 that you've never paid back. I've co-signed your mortgage. I've babysat Sebastian hundreds of weekends. I've brought you food, paid for emergencies, solved your problems. And what have I gotten in return? Mom, you know what I got in return last week? A few dollars thrown on a table and being called an old woman. That's the respect you have for me. Trish was stressed. No, Andrew. That's what you really think of me. And you know what? I'm not going to pretend it's okay anymore. I hung up again. This time I turned the phone off completely. For the first time in 5 years, my Saturday was my own. I sat on my bed for a long time, processing what had just happened. I had said no. I had said no to my son. I had set a boundary with someone for the first time in my adult life, and the world hadn't ended. I got up, took a slow shower without rushing. I put on a dress I had saved for months, a navy blue one that fit me well, but that I never wore because, what for, if I'm just going to clean offices or watch kids? I went outside and walked aimlessly for the first time in years. I wasn't fulfilling an obligation. I wasn't solving someone else's problem. I didn't have to be anywhere at any specific time. It was strange. It was liberating. It was terrifying. I went into a cafe in Greenwich Village I had always wanted to visit but never had the time. I ordered a cappuccino and a slice of carrot cake. I sat by the window and watched people go by. Young couples holding hands, families with children, women my age carrying shopping bags. Everyone had a life, plans, places to go, people waiting for them. And for the first time, I realized that I could have that too. The cake was delicious. The coffee, perfect. The feeling of being there without rushing, without guilt, without the pressure of having to go solve someone else's life. It was better than anything I had felt in years. A woman at the next table smiled at me. She was about my age, with perfectly coiffed white hair and an elegant blouse. "Excuse me for bothering you," she said, "but it brings me such joy to see someone our age enjoying a moment like this, alone and peaceful. It's so rare these days." "Why do you say that?" "Because most women of our generation never learned to be alone without feeling guilty. We always have to be taking care of someone, serving someone. being available for someone. Her words hit me right in the heart. You're right. It took me 70 years to learn that I deserve moments like this, she continued. My name is Eleanor, by the way. Carol, can I ask you something personal, Carol? What brought you here today? You look as if you've made an important decision. I don't know why, but I told her everything. I told her about Andrew, about Patricia, the coins on the table, the deception with the house, the years of feeling invisible. Eleanor listened without judgment, nodding occasionally, as if she knew every word of my story perfectly. You know what's the saddest part of all this? She said when I finished. That you believe you were a bad mother for setting a boundary with your son today. Well, yes. Mothers are supposed to raise children who respect them. Mothers are supposed to teach their children that love is not unconditional if it includes abuse. Mothers are supposed to value themselves enough not to accept crumbs. Eleanor took a card out of her purse. Tomorrow, on Sunday, a group of us women meet in Washington Square Park. We talk, share experiences, support each other. It's all ladies who have learned late in life that we deserve respect. Would you like to come? I took the card. Do you really think I'm not a bad mother for telling my son no? Carol, a good mother raises children who don't treat their mother like a housekeeper. If your son treats you that way, you didn't fail as a mother when you raised him. You are failing yourself now as a woman by allowing it. That night, when I got home, I found 17 missed calls and over 20 messages. Andrew, Patricia, even a voice message from Sebastian asking why I hadn't come to see him. I read them all, but I didn't reply to any. For the first time in 5 years, I ate dinner in peace. I made myself a grilled cheese sandwich, put on music I liked, and sat down to watch a whole movie without interruptions. At 10 o'clock, as I was getting ready for bed, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me looked like me, but there was something different in her eyes, a spark I hadn't seen in years. Hello, Carol, I said to my reflection. It's nice to meet you. It was the first time I liked the woman I saw in the mirror, and it was the first night in years that I went to sleep feeling proud of myself instead of guilty for existing. Tomorrow, I was going to Washington Square Park to meet Eleanor's friends. Tomorrow, I was going to start building a life that was truly my own. Tomorrow, I was going to keep practicing that wonderful word I had discovered today, no. Sunday dawned gray, the sky heavy with clouds threatening rain. I put on a light sweater and tucked Eleanor's card into my purse as if it were a treasure. I walked to Washington Square Park with my heart beating fast, as if I were about to get into trouble. I didn't know what I would find there, whether there would really be women waiting for me or if it had all been just the kind words of a stranger. When I arrived, I saw a group of folding chairs arranged under the large trees near the arch. There were about 15 women, all over 50, their faces etched with wrinkles that told stories of laughter and tears. Some had thermoses of coffee, others trays of pastries, and they all shared a serenity that surprised me. Eleanor recognized me immediately and raised a hand for me to come over. Carol, I'm so happy you came, she said with a warm smile. Honestly, I was hesitating until the very last minute, I confessed, taking a seat next to her. We all do the first time. Welcome to our little family. The introductions began. One by one, each woman said her name and shared a little of what had brought her there. There was a woman named Julia, whose son had stopped speaking to her after she refused to sell her house to pay off his debt. Another, Maria, told us how her 3 daughters only contacted her to ask for money or to babysit the grandkids, never just to spend time with her. Listening to their stories was like looking in a mirror. It shook me to realize I wasn't alone, that so many mothers had gone through the same thing. When it was my turn, my voice trembled as I began. I told them about Andrew, Patricia, the coins on the table, the deception of the sold house, my grandson being used as an excuse. Several women nodded as I spoke, some with tears in their eyes, others pressing their lips together as if they knew exactly how it felt. And yesterday, I told them no, I concluded, still in disbelief of my own words. For the first time in my life, I told my son no. There was a respectful silence, and then a soft, sincere round of applause. It wasn't mockery or pity. It was support. That reaction made me feel like I had taken a huge step. even if I didn't fully understand where it was leading me. After everyone had shared, one of the women, Teresa, pulled out a large notebook. Written on the cover was, "What we deserve." She passed it from hand to hand so each of us could write a sentence in it. When it reached me, I read some of the previous entries. I deserve respect even though I'm no longer young. I deserve to rest without feeling guilty. I deserve to be heard. I took the pen and wrote in a firm hand. I deserve to be loved without conditions or strings attached. Handing the notebook back, I felt a weight lift from my chest. It was as if those words had opened a space inside me that had been closed for years. When the meeting ended, Eleanor walked with me to the edge of the park. "See? You're not alone, Carol, and you're not crazy for feeling you deserve more. Thank you. Really. I needed to hear this. Now comes the hard part," she added in a firm voice. "Sticking to your decision, saying no once is liberating, but saying it the second, the third time, when your son calls you crying or trying to manipulate you, that's what truly changes your life." I nodded silently. I knew she was right. That same afternoon, my phone rang again. It was Andrew. I hesitated to answer, but in the end, I did. "Mom." His voice was softer, almost conciliatory. "Look, about yesterday, I'm sorry if I made you feel bad. It's just that we really count on you, and when you didn't come, it made things complicated." "Andrew, this isn't about complications. It's about respect. I do respect you, Mom. Of course I do. But you have to understand, Sebastian needs you. And I love him," I said, my throat tight. "But that doesn't mean I always have to be available. I have a right to my own time, my own life too." There was a long silence. In the background, I heard Patricia's voice murmuring something, but I couldn't make out what. "Well, okay," he finally answered. "I just wanted you to know that Sebastian asked about you. I know, and I'll see him soon, but on my terms. Not as a nanny, but as a grandmother." I hung up before he could start arguing. My hands were trembling, but I also felt a new, strange pride, as if I were learning to walk again. During the week, I devoted myself to things I hadn't done in years. I went to the local library and checked out a book of poetry. I took a walk through a park with a friend I hadn't seen in a long time. I bought a dress on sale that I never would have allowed myself before, thinking I was too old for it. Every small act was a reminder that my life wasn't over, that I could still rebuild myself from scratch. On Friday, I received an unexpected envelope in the mail. It was an official letter from the bank where years ago, I had opened a savings account that I had almost forgotten about. Inside was a statement showing that, thanks to the interest and a life insurance fund my late husband had left without me fully realizing it, I had more money accumulated than I ever imagined. It wasn't a massive fortune, but it was enough to give me security, to know that I didn't depend on anyone. I stared at those numbers over and over. I cried, but not from sadness. I cried with relief. For years, I had believed my life was tied to whatever Andrew chose to give or deny me. And now I realized I had the means to support myself, with dignity. On Saturday, I decided to do something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. I invited Sebastian to spend the day with me, but without asking his parents' permission. I called him directly on his tablet, using the number he had once given me in secret. "Grandma?" he answered, his voice full of excitement. "Yes, my love. Do you want to come to my house this weekend? I have your favorite cookies." "Yes, but what about Mom and Dad? Let's give them a break for a little while. I'll come get you, and they can find us later." I picked him up from his school's entrance on Saturday at noon. He was carrying his little blue backpack and a huge smile. We spent the day at my apartment. We cooked together, watched movies, and I even taught him how to make biscuits by hand. Sebastian was happy, free, without the constant shouting or orders from his parents. When Patricia found out, she called me, furious. "Ma'am, how dare you take Sebastian without telling us? That's kidnapping." "Calm down, Patricia. Your son is fine. He's happy. And you can pick him up tomorrow if you want. You can't just decide that. I am his grandmother. And for at least one weekend, I have the right to enjoy his company without being treated like a servant." I hung up. This time, my voice didn't shake. Sebastian hugged me tightly before he went to sleep. "Grandma, I feel at home with you. Those words gave me back everything I had lost. That night, as I watched him sleep, I understood that true love doesn't need coins on a table, or permission, or humiliation. True love shines in a child's laughter, in the calm of a hug, in the dignity a woman reclaims when she recognizes her own worth. I promised myself I would never again let them treat me like a burden. I would never again accept crumbs disguised as affection. From now on, every step I took would be for myself, and for the future I still had the right to live. I didn't do it secretly or with fear, but with my head held high, walking hand in hand with him to the entrance of the high-rise in Long Island City where they now lived. Patricia was waiting for us at the door, arms crossed, with that look she always used to make it clear she didn't want me around. Andrew appeared a few minutes later, still in his pajamas, looking sleepy. "Where were you?" Patricia asked in a sharp voice, speaking to Sebastian. "With Grandma," he replied with an innocent smile. "We made cookies and watched movies." Patricia turned to me, furious. "Ma'am, you can't just take him like that. You need to tell us, to ask for permission." "No," I interrupted her calmly. "I am his grandmother. I don't need to ask for permission to share a day with him. And if you want to set rules, then there will be rules for me too. From now on, I will only be available when I truly want to be, not when it's convenient for you." Andrew tried to intervene, but Sebastian ran to hug me again before going inside. "Grandma, I want to come back soon," he whispered. That small gesture gave me the strength I needed. I kissed him on the forehead and let him go, while Patricia pulled him away harshly. I walked away from the building with a firm step, as if I had closed a door inside myself. That week, Andrew tried to reach me several times. At first with short texts, then with long phone calls, and finally with an almost desperate tone. "Mom, I need to talk to you. Can we meet?" I agreed, but at a public coffee shop, not at their apartment. I no longer wanted to enter their world of rules and contempt. When he arrived, I was surprised to see how nervous he was. His hands were restless and he avoided looking me directly in the eye. "Mom, I know things aren't right, but I want you to know that I need you. Do you need me, or do you need what I can give you?" I asked bluntly. He fell silent, and that silence was more revealing than any answer. "Did you know I found out about the house in Queens?" I added, lowering my voice. His eyes widened in surprise. "Who told you?" "It doesn't matter who. What matters is that I know you sold it without telling me, that you used me as a cover, that you made me believe you still lived there just to keep controlling me." Andrew was speechless. Patricia wasn't there, so he couldn't hide behind her. After a few seconds, he muttered, "We didn't want to worry you." "Worry me? What you did was deceive me. And the worst part, Andrew, is that you let your own son be part of that lie." My voice was trembling, but not from weakness. It was contained rage. Andrew hung his head. For a moment, I saw in him the little boy who once apologized for breaking a vase, the young man who cried in my arms when he didn't get his first job. But that boy was gone. He had been buried by comfort, indifference, and ambition. "Mom, I'm really sorry. It was Trish who—" "No, Andrew. Enough with blaming other people. You were the one who gave me those dollars. You were the one who let the words 'old woman' come out of your mouth. You were the one who allowed your wife to disrespect me time and time again." The silence became unbearable. Finally, he just said, "I don't know how to fix this." "I do. Start by respecting me. And understand that from now on, I will no longer be your nanny or your safety net." I got up and left, leaving him with the words caught in his throat. That was the first time I saw him truly vulnerable, as if he was finally realizing what he was losing. The following days, I dedicated myself to small but significant things. I organized my apartment, painted one of the walls a light blue, and bought plants for the balcony. I started writing in a notebook, not just my painful memories, but also my deferred dreams, traveling to Savannah, taking a painting class, signing up for a writing workshop. Every list I made was like opening a window to the life I had denied myself for years. The women's group in the park became my sanctuary. Every Sunday I'd arrive with coffee or donuts, and every Sunday I'd leave with my heart a little lighter. Hearing how others had also reclaimed their voices filled me with courage. One of them, Laura, invited me to an art exhibit downtown. I never thought that at my age I could still discover new passions. But that afternoon, as I looked at the colorful paintings, I felt as if my life were just beginning. Patricia, for her part, didn't take long to show her true colors. One night she called me, screaming, "Sebastian won't stop asking for you. He won't eat dinner unless it's with his grandma. Are you happy? Are you going to take him away from me now too?" I took a deep breath before answering. "No, Patricia. I don't want to take anything from you. I just want what is rightfully mine. My grandson's love and my dignity as a woman. And you can't take that away from me." I hung up without giving her a chance to continue her tirade. For the first time in a long time, I slept peacefully after a confrontation. The months passed, and my relationship with Andrew became distant, intermittent. Sometimes he would call with clumsy excuses to visit me. Other times, weeks would go by without a word. I learned not to expect anything, not to put my life on hold for him. Each absence hurt a little less, because I was learning to fill my days with other things. One Friday, I received an unexpected invitation. The women's group from the park had organized a trip to New Orleans. I hesitated at first, thinking about the expense, but when I remembered the money in the account I had discovered, I smiled. I could afford it, and more than that, I deserved it. The trip was a revelation. I walked through the French Quarter, admired the wrought iron balconies, listened to jazz music spill out into the night. For the first time in decades, I felt light, as if the world still had space for me. I took photos, laughed until I cried, and tried food I had never tasted before. I returned home with beautiful memories and the certainty that life wasn't over, that I still had chapters left to write. When I got back, a message from Andrew was waiting for me. "Mom, I need to see you. It's important." We met at my apartment that same afternoon. He came alone without Patricia. I noticed he looked different. Thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, a tired face. He sat across from me and lowered his head. "Mom, I was wrong about a lot of things. Trish and well, things aren't going well. We argue all the time, and Sebastian is suffering because of it. He wants to be with you more often." My heart skipped a beat, but I remained firm. "Andrew, I will always be there for my grandson. But you have to understand that I am not going back to being the invisible woman you both used whenever it was convenient." He nodded silently, his eyes moist. I couldn't tell if it was real remorse or fear of being left alone. But for the first time in years, I was the one in control. That night, I went to bed with a clear thought. My story was no longer about being the sacrificial mother who gave everything and received nothing. Now, it was the story of a woman who had learned, late but just in time, that she also had the right to live, to enjoy, to be respected. And although there was still a long road ahead, something inside me told me that the worst was over, that the coins thrown on the table had been the beginning of my rebirth. The days after that conversation with Andrew were a mix of calm and tension. I knew my words had affected him, that a crack had formed inside him where the truth was seeping in, even if he wasn't ready to fully acknowledge it. Meanwhile, I continued to rebuild myself. I enrolled in a writing workshop at the local community center, something I had always dreamed of but never allowed myself. The first time I walked into that room, I felt like a child on her first day of school. There were long tables, open notebooks, pens at the ready. There were 10 of us, mostly women my age, with the shared dream of putting into words what we had kept silent for a lifetime. When the instructor asked us to write about an important childhood memory, my hands trembled. But from my pen flowed a story of how my mother taught me to sew a dress for my doll, using old fabric scraps. Reading it aloud, I heard my own vulnerability, but also my strength. I felt that every word was giving me back little pieces of myself. Sebastian came to visit the following weekend. It wasn't Patricia's or Andrew's plan. He was the one who insisted. He hugged me tightly as soon as he came in and ran to my kitchen as if he knew every corner by heart. "Grandma, did you make cookies?" "Yes, my love. Chocolate chip. Just how you like them." As I watched him eat with such unbridled joy, I thought that even though my relationship with his parents was full of wounds, this child was both my anchor and my engine. He reminded me that I still had true love in my life, and that I didn't need emotional handouts from anyone. That afternoon, while we were playing, Sebastian looked at me with a seriousness uncommon for a boy his age. Grandma, why do my mom and dad always fight with you? I swallowed hard. Because sometimes, sweetheart, grown-ups forget what's important. But what you must never forget is that I love you more than anything in this world. He hugged me tight and went back to playing. That short conversation made me realize that children understand much more than adults think, and that the distance Andrew and Patricia tried to create between us had only strengthened our bond. One Monday, I received an unexpected call. It was a woman who introduced herself as Ms. Ramirez, an attorney from the company where Andrew worked. Mrs. Evans, I'm sorry to bother you. We just need to verify some documents. Your son is listed as a guarantor on a loan, and you are listed as a reference. My heart sped up. What kind of loan? A personal loan for a considerable sum. Don't worry, you are not a cosigner, just a contact. But we needed to confirm some details. I hung up and felt a chill. Another debt. Another secret. It was as if Andrew was repeating the same pattern over and over. Promises, silences, and me discovering the half-truths. For a moment, I thought about calling to confront him, but then I decided against it. It was no longer my obligation to carry the weight of his decisions. Instead of sinking into anxiety, I went to the bank and made an appointment with a financial advisor. I explained my situation, the money I had discovered in my account, my fears of losing it through some mistake. A patient young man helped me, explaining how I could invest a portion of those savings in a secure retirement plan without depending on anyone. I walked out of there with a contract in hand and an enormous sense of relief in my chest. For the first time in my life, I had control over something that belonged only to me. The next meeting in the park with the women was different. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't share a complaint or a wound, but an achievement. I told them I had invested in myself, that I had taken a step forward without waiting for anyone's approval. They all applauded and hugged me. Eleanor, with tears in her eyes, told me, "You see, Carol, you're blossoming. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to discover you can still be reborn." One afternoon, weeks later, I received an unexpected visit from Patricia. She knocked on my door with a tense, almost arrogant look, but behind that facade, I could tell she was upset. "I need to talk to you," she said as soon as I opened the door. "Come in." She sat at my table as if the mere act of being there made her uncomfortable. "Look, I don't like you, and you know it. But Andrew isn't doing well. He's worried about money, about his job, about everything. And Sebastian won't stop asking to see you. And what do you want me to do?" I asked calmly. "I don't know. Just don't abandon him completely." I was surprised to hear her say that. There was a hint of humanity in her voice I had never noticed before. Perhaps because deep down, she also knew that if Andrew fell, I was the only real support left. "Patricia," I replied, "I will not abandon my son or my grandson, but I will not go back to being invisible either. If you want me in your lives, it will be on my terms. Respect comes first." She looked down. She didn't answer, but her silence was enough. That night, as I got into bed, I thought about all the turns my life had taken in such a short time. From being treated like a burden, I had moved on to supporting myself, reclaiming my voice, and setting clear boundaries. And although the wounds with Andrew still hurt, they no longer defined me. One Friday, as I was walking back from my writing workshop, I saw an ad in the window of a travel agency on the corner. European tour, Madrid, Paris, Rome. I stood in front of the poster for a long time. It was the kind of dream I had always postponed because there was no money, because my children needed me, because it was too late for me. But now I had the means, the desire, and above all, the freedom. That night, I opened my laptop and, with trembling hands, booked a seat. Not in economy, not in the last corner of the plane, but in business class. I laughed to myself, remembering those dollars Andrew had tossed at me with contempt. I thought, if he only knew that his mother, the same one he treated like trash, is about to fly over the Atlantic with a glass of champagne in her hand. The following days were a mix of excitement and nerves. I packed carefully, chose my nicest clothes, and bought a new set of luggage. I told Eleanor and the group at the park, and they all celebrated with me as if it were a collective triumph. "Travel for all of us, Carol," Julia told me. "Show the world it's never too late." Before I left, I invited Sebastian to spend a whole day with me. We cooked, we laughed, we painted pictures that I later hung in my living room. When I took him back, he hugged me tight and whispered in my ear, "Grandma, bring me a postcard from Paris." "I'll bring you more than a postcard, my love. I'll bring you a promise that your grandma will never again let anyone humiliate her." That same night, I confirmed my e-ticket. The date was set. In just a few days, my flight would depart, the beginning of a new chapter. I looked in the mirror before going to sleep. The woman I saw was no longer the same one who picked up coins from the floor with trembling hands. Now, she was someone who had dared to say no, to reclaim what was hers, to take a leap into the unknown. And as I turned off the light, I knew the best was yet to come. The day of my trip dawned with a clear sun, the kind that feels like a blessing. I arrived at the airport with my new suitcases, still in disbelief that the woman reflected in the terminal's glass windows was me, a woman in her 60s, with her gray hair elegantly pinned up, walking confidently toward the business class line. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with excitement. While waiting to check in, I saw entire families arguing over seats, businessmen hurriedly checking their emails, young people taking selfies. I felt out of place, and at the same time, more at home than ever. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I was there because I had earned it. Upon entering the VIP lounge, the smell of freshly ground coffee and sweet pastries enveloped me. I sat down with a glass of white wine, unhurried, and watched through the window as the planes took off one after another. I thought of Andrew and those dollars he threw at me with contempt. I thought of Patricia and her cold smile, and I smiled to myself. If they knew where I was now, if they could see me, perhaps for the first time in years they would understand that I wasn't a burden, but a woman capable of flying higher than them. On the plane, I was welcomed to a wide seat, almost like an armchair. They offered me a menu I could never have imagined tasting, and when I toasted with champagne before takeoff, I felt that every bubble was a memory of all the tears I had swallowed in silence. Outside, New York City grew smaller, and with it, so did my fears. I arrived in Madrid first. Walking down the illuminated Gran Via was like entering a dream I had kept for decades. Then Paris, with the Eiffel Tower sparkling at night like a beacon. And finally, Rome, where every stone seemed to tell me ancient secrets. I walked slowly, savoring every corner, every smell, every taste. I took photos, wrote postcards, and in every word I wrote to Sebastian, I felt I was also giving him the idea that life doesn't end just because others say it does. In a cafe in Montmartre, I met a group of Spanish women my age. We talked about our lives, our children, our grandchildren, our lost loves. One of them told me, "How brave you are to travel alone." And I replied with a sincerity that surprised me. I'm not traveling alone. I'm traveling with all the parts of me that were asleep and have now woken up. When I returned to New York, something inside me had changed forever. My skin was tanned, my heart was full of memories, and I had the certainty that I would never again let myself be reduced to the role of an invisible servant. Sebastian ran into my arms as soon as he saw me. "Grandma, did you bring me my postcard?" I gave him not one, but 3. From Madrid, Paris, and Rome. His eyes shone like stars. "When you grow up," I told him, "I want you to know that the world is yours, and no one can tell you otherwise." Andrew stood behind him, silent. He didn't hug me, he didn't smile, but I noticed in his eyes a mixture of shame and admiration. When we were alone, he murmured, "Mom, I didn't know you could do all this." "Of course I can. And you should know this too. Underestimating me was your biggest mistake." We didn't argue anymore. There was no need. I had crossed a border with no return. Over time, Patricia grew more distant. Whenever she saw me with Sebastian, she shot me looks filled with resentment. But they no longer hurt me. Her words lost their power against someone who had learned to recognize her own value. Andrew, little by little, began to approach me with a different attitude. No longer as someone who demands, but as someone who needs to learn. There were afternoons when he asked me for life advice. nights when he called just to hear my voice. I didn't forget the pain he caused me, but I learned not to carry it like a cross anymore. One day, at one of our Sunday gatherings, Eleanor hugged me tightly and said, "Carol, you're unrecognizable. You're glowing." And I understood it wasn't a superficial compliment. There was something in my eyes, in my posture, in my voice, that showed I was no longer the defeated woman picking up coins from the floor. I confirmed the greatest lesson on an ordinary afternoon, sitting on my balcony with a cup of coffee. I watched the sunset paint the buildings orange and thought, all this time, I believed living was about enduring, sacrificing, disappearing. But living is this: feeling the wind, savoring my food, walking without fear, saying no when necessary, and saying yes when I truly desire it. Andrew came over one day with Sebastian, and for the first time in years, without asking for anything, he just came to see me. He sat at my table, tasted my food, and stayed quiet for a long time before saying, "Mom, thank you for teaching me that I can be wrong too, and thank you for not giving up." I didn't answer with words. I just smiled at him, because in that moment, I understood that I no longer needed explanations or apologies. Life had already put everything in its place. Today, looking back, I know that 80% of my journey was filled with suffering, humiliation, and loneliness. But that final 20%, that late awakening, is worth more than everything I lost, because it gave me back the one thing I should have never let go of, my dignity. And that is the lesson I want to leave with you, who are listening to my story. Never accept being defined by what others need from you. You are not a burden. You are not a shadow. You are not invisible. You are a complete life that deserves respect, love, and freedom. What about you? Have you ever experienced or known someone who has gone through something similar? Answer me in the comments with your experience. If this story touched your heart, I ask you to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so that this message can reach someone who needs to hear it.